Kiev regime. The Belgorod region, October 3rd, AFU militants shelled settlements and civil facilities. They shelled out 70 different munitions. 2 people died, 3 were injured. October 4th, in the settlement of Gora Podol, a UAV dropped detonation devices, which resulted in various shrapnel wounds that were sustained by a 16-year-old boy. In Belgorod, 4 civilians were injured. October 5th, a UAV massive attack, including FPV drones, injured 6 people, including a 10-year-old teenager and 15-year-old boy. October 6th, Belgorod. It was under the fire of American HIMARS MLRS systems. Repair crews were affected. They were addressing the consequences of previous attacks of Banderites. Regrettably, 2 people died. The Bryansk region, October 4th, the Pogar settlement. Ukraine Nazis attacked a bus terminal. 1 civilian was injured. 2 passenger minibuses were damaged. October 5th, the settlement of Podevotie. Shrapnel wounds were sustained by a commercial enterprise employee. The DPR, October 2nd to 5th, Gorlovka, Makievka, and Yasinovata, 2 civilians died, 10 were injured, including children born in 2009 and 2011. The Kursk region, October 1st, the settlement Mokrushina, a Ukrainian FPV drone attacked a civilian car. A 28-year-old woman was injured. October 3rd, the settlement of Belaya, a UAV attacked a shopping mall. 2 civilians were injured. October 2nd, the regional court designated 117 people dead during the occupation of the AFU of the Suja region. Well, that's what they gloomed over using the money of the West. Russian courts continue to render sentences to Ukrainian neo-Nazis for crimes in the Kursk region against civilians, and Russian servicemen captured AFU militants were sentenced to 18 years in prison. Sergei Moshkievsky, 17 years in prison. Oleg Sadovets, Vadim Yermaka, Ruslan Garbus, Vadim Godovanov, Konstantin Netkov, and Mikhail Pogorelny, 16 years in prison. Alexei Ninichuk, 15 years in prison. For killing a civilian in Mariupol, an Azov regiment fighter, Maxim Datsko, was sentenced to 22 years with service in a high-security correctional colony. To 14 years in prison in absentia were sentenced militants from Australia, Colin Benjamin Lewis and Denis de Carvalho Dantas Isaac from Brazil. They were declared internationally wanted. Just look at the reaction of the European Union. You can look at the photographs of the killed children, the civilian, peaceful population. They can point at the map and see how the Kiev regime is disrupting the peaceful life there. But the European Union does not stop its attempts to find additional resources to sustain the Zelensky's regime. It wasn't one of the central tasks in the agenda of the Copenhagen informal EU summit on October 1st. They are going to use the frozen Russian sovereign assets. According to the European Commission, 140 billion euros will be allocated to Kiev as an interest-free loan. The Kiev regime will hardly be able to ever return these funds. Why? Because the main condition to return these funds is a requirement that is far from the reality to pay reparations to Russia, and Russia should do it. So what are we going to pay reparations for, according to them? For our citizens that have passed away, that have died, maybe for those who we rescued in Donetsk, in Lugansk. Since 2014, they've been sending tanks to these regions. But we have to pay reparations to NATO, to the European Union, to this NATO brigade for the fact that we have been sending humanitarian aid to these regions, textbooks, food, other means. We have been restoring the infrastructure so that people could get electricity, hot water. Is that what we have to pay for? But in this warped world the European Union and NATO are living, maybe that's the way it should be. But we are living in another reality, in real reality, and we know that Brussels has been engaged in stealing Russian sovereign assets. They are making up different formulas for that. Now they've come up with some kind of a reparations, but the essence stays the same. They are stealing our sovereign assets. In the first quarter of the 2025, Brussels has seized and sent to the European Union 10.1 billion euros. On the eve of the summit in Copenhagen, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, declared on the allocation as part of the Group of Seven initiative of the ninth tranche of the EU in microfinancial assistance in the form of the further 4 billion euro loan secured by the proceeds from our frozen assets. At the same time, half of this sum will be allocated to AFU needs, in particular for procuring UAVs that are used to kill children. The overall volume of aid of the European Union to Ukraine since 2022 has amounted, and this will be interesting first and foremost for French citizens that are now asking what is happening to their economy, to their life, to their social sphere. So since 2022, the European Union has helped, so to say, Ukraine by sending 178 billion euros to that country. How many people have died because of this money that are residing on these territories? People of different nationalities that have different citizenships. The European Union is silent about that. Let me emphasize it once again. The overall amount of aid has amounted to 178 billion euros that were used to kill, first and foremost, Ukrainian citizens, but also to kill citizens of other countries. This money was also used for that, to kill Russian citizens, to kill citizens of other countries that, for example, were recruited by the Kiev regime and which is applauded by NATO countries. So what kind of money is that? This is money that comes from different sources. This is taxpayers' money from the European Union countries. This is money that was stolen from our country. But Brussels, that is trying to justify its actions by some kind of a legitimacy, is silent about that when it talks to its citizens. So take this aid, 178 billion euros. 63 billion euros was allocated to direct military aid. So only for these bloodshed purposes, over 63 billion euros were allocated. The Brussels finds it more and more expensive to sustain the Zelensky regime. The European officials are now trying to steal Russian assets because they are running out of funds. The more they do that, the better their life will become, they think. But they are promoting a fraudulent lending scheme, and it caused a moderate reaction in European capitals. A propensity for fraud, it seems, is still subordinate to the fear before lawful repercussions and retaliatory measures, and I emphasize it, these will be harsh measures. In Copenhagen, they also discussed financing joint defense projects, including a recent initiative to establish a common European wall of drones to protect themselves from Russia, as they said. But no decisions were made. The European conservative, commenting on the results of the summit, said, in Copenhagen, October 1st, European leaders again demonstrated that their response to the continuation of the conflict in Ukraine includes not diplomacy, but escalation. Yes, I agree, and we agree. People who hold posts of European officials engage in machinations, and they should be prosecuted. Those are people who have no knowledge of diplomacy. They're just being turned into tools for escalation. Yesterday, Finland Foreign Minister made a statement saying that Russia allegedly violated all principles of OSCE, the 10 principles. It does not hold any water. One can only understand such statements in the following way. The head of the Finnish Foreign Ministry doesn't have any idea of what international diplomacy is. She has held different posts. They used to be an engineer, maybe, and she organized different events, and she was engaged in domestic agenda. But then, all of a sudden, she was appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs of this country. That's why we hear such statements. She doesn't have any idea what these 10 principles of OSCE is, who this principle were developed by, what was the foundation of this principle, and who has violated them in reality. October 2nd, Copenhagen held the 7th summit of the European Political Community. Its agenda included migration, economic security, and hybrid threats. But the main emphasis was on Ukraine. The tone of discussion was set by President of the European Council, Antonio Costa. They have to think about root causes. They have to look at their own economies and what is happening to these economies due to their manipulations in Ukraine. Despite logics and facts, he said that their actions were aimed at supporting and maintaining peace, not the war. They have aggressive rhetoric. They're allocating money for war purposes. He called upon giving Kiev military, political, economic aid and to mobilize forces to strengthen the collective European defense in face of the Russian threat.
But actually they invented that Russian threat. They publicized that widely, and now they take the decision to strengthen the alleged collective European security. Zelensky, who was present, presented his list of wishes of Ukraine. There is the entire coalition of the willing there, the willing Zelensky. It was the prioritized Ukraine requirements list, the loan financing of defense projects, security action for Europe, the new strong package of anti-Russian sanctions by the European Union that used to be 18 packages. Now it will be strong packages. The use of Russian assets, their theft, as Zelensky put it, the future of Kiev. Actually, his requests were ignored by everyone because the participants were busy with their own problems and used this platform for sideline meetings. In general, the European political community, advertised by a French president as he put it, a new space for cooperation. That's his words, but it did not live to the expectations. But actually they have created so many forums these years, completely useless, without any results. The understanding was just paralyzed. Why the purpose of holding those forums? Some people think that if the forum is held, it's a result already, but tell what you want. Measures for Ukraine, and then you will be able to understand whether you have gained it or not. But to hold forums by coalitions just for the sake of their name, just to make statements, empty statements, and implementing some initiatives, is just needed to distract attention from their own problems and not the resolution of the problems that exist, the problem of Ukraine. The only achievement of this format is the demonstration of anti-Russian agenda as this instrument destined to distract their own citizens from their own tasks, purposes, and about the tragedy in Ukraine. It's about the continued forced mobilization, but I think it's just a genocide of Ukrainian people. The sad outcome of those two European gatherings in Copenhagen, they disappointed Zelensky. He requested from his, so to say, partners to fork out for budget deficit coverage the sum of 8 billion euro for the maintenance of the army and to finance the hostilities in 2026. It would amount to from 25 to 120 billion euros. Actually, Western curators link the volumes of military shipments to Kiev regime with the number of mobilized people in Ukraine. What does that mean? They paid to Zelensky for him to kill the Ukrainian citizens. It's an old idea of Central Europe. It has already been tested, has already been implemented in the ideology, the philosophy of European countries in 1930s, 1940s to destroy the Slavic Eastern European population. They called it differently, but on that very territories, the territory of Ukraine, among others. And when the EU NATO curators of Zelensky's say that they will pay him only when he will force to go to slaughter, to send to slaughter his own citizens. It's not just civilized, it's just lack of any humanity. It's the continuation of the concept of destruction by those ideologies. You can name them as you want. Imperialist, colonial thinking, racial superiority, they have already been tested. But it's a new level, a new century. In the Ukrainian social media, the issue is widely discussed of recruitment of about 1.5 million people. Who will those people be? They will be Ukrainian citizens. What will their age be, their condition, their health? It will not be of concern for anyone. They will just be sent to this slaughter by Westerners, the slaughter of that Western hell created on the territory of Ukraine. There is a statement about the further closing of borders in Ukraine and nearly nationwide mobilization. It will be meat storms and further utilization of Ukrainians. Ukrainian population by Zelensky. Total military registration will be obligatory for Ukrainian citizens. Zelensky has forced a draft law in Verkhovna Rada, a draft law about common information system of social sphere. This regime will gain access to the digital portrait of any Ukrainian, including his location, and Ukrainian military officers will be able to hunt for humans. Information has also been published about catching former Ukrainian fighters. They are recognized as fit for service and sent to the front line. With those measures, Zelensky gang has decided to avoid expenses for veterans and to get rid of them, to get rid of those people who have experience, who have authority. Bankova government does not need that. They will be sent for slaughter. When will the Ukrainian people wake up? I would like to directly ask this question. And what we have mentioned for all those years, this Kiev terrorist regime, it has no borders. They're exploring all these areas, regions in the world, and they implement their terrorist activities in different countries, namely Sahara-Sahel region of Africa, Libya. National unity government has interaction with Great Britain and Kiev militants with the use of combat UAVs. There are facts about the cooperation of national unity government in Libya with Ukrainians and facilitating terrorist operations in the Sahel countries, including Niger. On the 1st of October, Sudanese military intelligence colonel said that Ukrainian and Colombian militants supported the rapid support forces in Sudan and used the Ukrainian produced UAVs. It's illegal selling of arms and munitions by the Ukrainian army. It is recorded in Burkina Faso, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mali, Niger, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, the Central African Republic, and Chad. The stealing of munitions and equipment shipped by Kiev is recorded not only in troops but on the front line. GPS trackers are dismantled. When they are lost, they are written off as casualties and further sold abroad. And around half a million of equipment units have been, so to say, lost. In 2024, it was 270,000 cases of possible theft. Also, insinuations by the Kiev regime about alleged threat from Russia. On the 3rd of October, Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Sergei Kislitsa, tried to frighten the countries of Europe, mentioning Russian agents and moles who launch UAVs in Denmark and Germany. Of course, there was no proof of that, no evidence. It was just attempts to whip up anti-Russian hysteria. And He even mentioned quotation that the Kremlin is already at war with Europe. It's about receiving more money. That's the purpose of Zelensky's statements. And that's the explanation why they should provide this money. I would recommend to Kislitsa not to invent those myths that the Russian trace, but to read the European media about the detention in Germany and in Norway of the suspects in launching UAVs in Frankfurt, Roswell and Svolvær. Who were they? They were citizens not connected with Russia in any way, citizens of Germany, Croatia and some other countries. These facts once again confirm the urgency of the tasks of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats from its territory. All these goals will be certainly achieved. I would like to say a few words about publishing by UN HRC special procedures regarding the Kiev regime's persecution of the canonical Ukrainian church, published on the 1st of October on the website of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. The UN officials have mentioned the persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, the violation of the freedom of belief and the freedom of worship. It was the revocation of the citizenship of Metropolitan Onufry, primate of the UOC, and the leaders of the UOC were also persecuted, including Metropolitans Arseny, Paul, Theodosi, Longin, Father Eugene Kotelnik, journalist Dmitry Skresov, and lawyer Svetlana Novitskaya. These prosecutions appear to amount to collective punishment against members of the UOC and those defending them. It's a quotation. There is also the Ukrainian law on the protection of constitutional order that contradicts the international standards in human rights. So at least they have drawn attention to that. It's contrary to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Freedom of thought, conscience and religion are not subject to restrictions, even in situations of armed conflict, as they have pointed out. It was accusations in extremism and pro-Russian orientation, allegedly incompatible with the principles of law and undermining the freedom of thought, religion, as well as of freedom of associations. We call upon the Kiev government to stop those restrictive measures against priests, human activists, human rights activists and journalists. It was for the first time since 2018 when the war has been launched in Ukraine against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, actually the war to destroy orthodoxy in Ukraine. Finally, they have noticed this lack of morality and impunity measures against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church parishes and priests. Such mechanisms, it is just difficult not to accuse them of political bias. They demonstrate the scale and gravity of the situation connected with human rights in Ukraine. The gravity of this situation, and also would like to draw the attention of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, and his office. And those officials from Bankova who have completely lost their feeling of morality, they just lack any feelings. There have been multiple occasions of seizures of temples of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, violence against priests and parishioners. There is also evidence of torture, of beatings of the arrested clergymen. Actually, let us hope that with this statement, maybe the ice has not been broken, but it has started to melt. And the human rights structures will pay attention to violations of rights and human freedoms in Ukraine, including the discrimination based on religious grounds, ban of opposition parties. It is not compliant to any laws. It's violation of the freedom of thoughts, banning any protests, and we hope that international human rights mechanisms will publicly make a statement about the unacceptability of this policy implemented by the Kiev regime. And now this contagious disease is spread in Moldova. There are tensions there following the, I do not think they can be called elections. Maybe this word should be just crossed out. Elections on the 28th of September. It's anti-Russian policy countering the alleged Russian threat. The Moldovan Prime Minister said, let's not be overly optimistic, because I don't believe the Kremlin will simply leave us alone. He actually did not explain what he meant by that. The rhetoric used by Chisinau regime to stifle, to suppress its political opponents. They're subject to real terror. On the 2nd of October, the Central Election Commission crossed out of the list of parties allowed to participate in elections the party named the Heart of Moldova. This ban is for 1 year. This party is headed by Irina Vlach, former governor of Gagauzia. She supports cooperation with Russia. On the very same day, the Chisinau Court of Appeal limited the actions of 2 more parties, the Modern Democratic Party of Moldova and the Great Moldova. Those parties faced repressions. On the 5th of October, the Moldovan Central Election Committee decided to stop the financing of the party Democracy at Home for 2 years. The party that received, that got 6 seats in the new parliament. Now they have labeled the Eurasia organization as extremist. This structure is engaged in cultural, in education activities, in exchanges between school children, students, young specialists of neighboring countries, studying culture, traditions and friendly relations.
Moldovan political analysts indicate that the current situation in Moldova is an example of political absurd. The third is do everything they can to attack dissent, but they don't do anything to rectify the bad social and economic situation. Let's look at the statistics. In the first half year, a low level of GDP of Moldova has reduced by 0.1%. The export to CIS countries in January-July this year, compared to the same period of last year, decreased by 22%. That's what the CIS countries needs. That's what Moldovans need. The Moldovan export to EU countries also decreased by 4%. It's an indication of how European agricultural enterprises need competitors from Moldova. Of course, they don't need that. The external debt of Moldova in the last six months, in the first 6 months of this year, increased by 10.5% and amounted to $11.4 billion. For future generations of Moldovans, it's an unsustainable burden. Experts indicate that such catastrophic indicators impede Moldova from joining the EU. But it's nothing more than a political slogan that has nothing to do with the reality. This great future of liberal democracies as part of NATO and the EU can then be achieved. But at what price? By annihilating Moldovans themselves. That's the price that Maya Sandu has to pay. Maybe she needs a sticker with the Ukrainian flag, so everything can be sold and bought. That's what the Chisinau regime is guided by. The Moldovans are bitterly aware that they are now in the tragic situation. They want peace and good neighborly relations with all countries, but their opinion is disdainfully ignored by Moldovan authorities and is supplanted by a fake slogan about the irreversibility of the European path. The irreversibility of your happiness, that's what they're saying. In reality, this irreversibility leads to poverty and debt bondage. Friendly people, very hardworking and peace-loving, and that's what's happening to these people. I think that everyone will have to pay for what they have done. What Sandu is doing to Moldova and what she is doing to the citizens that she's lying to, she will have to pay for it as well. Now, to the Middle East. I'd like to point out the commentary by Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov. Maybe it has already been published. There are a lot of questions that have been asked about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We still have a very difficult situation in the Middle East. We're now talking about the Palestinian-Israeli confrontation. Since October 2023, the start of the military operation of Israel in Gaza, the number of Palestinians that died exceeded 67,000 people. Over 170,000 have been injured. According to the information, almost 90% of the civilian infrastructure has been damaged. Since the first days of the escalation of the crisis in Gaza, the Russian Federation has favored the protection of the civilian population. Together with international partners, we have elaborated and submitted for consideration to the UN Security Council a number of resolutions that call upon a ceasefire and guarantee the unimpeded delivery of humanitarian supplies to all those in need. Regrettably, these initiatives have been blocked. The main goal in current situation is the ceasefire and inadmissibility of further sacrifices among the civilians. We support the plan of the U.S. administration on Gaza that includes ceasefire, the release of detained individuals, and the full-scale restoration of humanitarian access. We are convinced that the root cause of these tragic events in Gaza and in the West Bank is the deprivation of the Palestinian people's sovereign right to determine their own future. The sole solution to secure the sustainable peace for all peoples of the Middle East is and still is and has always been the comprehensive and long-term settlement of Palestinian-Israeli conflict using the international and legal foundation and the two-state solution. Otherwise, the peace will not come. A violent or the blatant violation of rights of Palestinian people will only fuel the extremist tendencies in all countries of the region. Just look at what is happening over there. Now, over to Australia and their Russophobic actions. We are outraged by another round of Russophobia. Australia denied entry visas to delegation of the Roscosmos State Corporation headed by Director General Dmitry Bakhanov. They were headed there to participate in the 76th International Astronautical Congress, IAC, that is going to take place in Sydney from September 20, that took place on September 29th to October 3rd. We have an unfriendly narrative that reflects blind Canberra policies in line of short-sighted and ill-conceived campaign of the collective West. What they want to exacerbate the situation further. There have been numerous attempts to not allow Russian representatives to the events of this Congress. They have already damaged greatly the authority of this forum. It has been politicized greatly, and the agenda is very biased, and only interests of certain groups are being served. We see indicators of degradation of this platform. It is unable to constructively contribute to a unified, peaceful outer space agenda that is now being in demand by the states of the global majority, and it is regrettable. We would like to emphasize that the Russian Federation is open to mutually beneficial, non-discriminatory cooperation with all interested partners to explore outer space in peaceful purposes to the benefit of all humankind. A lot has been said about the visit of Russian President to the Republic of Tajikistan. It starts today, October 8th, and we have received many questions. Of course, the Presidential Executive Office has the prerogative to comment on this issue. We have different responsibilities, but we can share some information responding to your questions regarding the cooperation with our countries. Both countries are carrying out a dynamic joint work to expand mutually beneficial cooperation on a wide scale of areas: energy, agriculture, transportation, ecology, and we strengthen our ties in defense and border security. A number of bilateral large-scale projects are being implemented. For example, the Russian BTC Group is now carrying out a project to create in Tajikistan light industry cluster. Sanktuda, one hydroelectric power plant constructed with Russian investment, continues to operate stably. It's one of the most large-scale joint projects in the post-Soviet space. Work is being underway to create in the Republic a Russian Tajikistan industrial park. The cooperation is being expanded in electronic trade. Marketplaces and different enterprises are entering the Tajikistan market. Online platforms are being enhanced, logistics networks, parcel pickup points in Tajikistan are being opened. A memorandum has been signed in digital technologies that will contribute to enhancing digital platforms according to standards, unifying the rules according to EAEU standards. We have first results that heads of our states will talk about, and people accompanying them, officials accompanying them. Progressive work is underway to remove the barriers to enhance infrastructure. We're talking about bilateral electronic trade. Our country continues to help Tajikistan in education, Russian language, Russian culture. A center is being constructed for talented people, and a new building is being built of the Mayakovsky Theater in Dushanbe, and we hope that the doors of these enterprises will solemnly open for the wide audiences in 2027. Tajikistan traditionally has been receiving Russian humanitarian help, and have been talking about it regularly during our briefings. We're using UN platforms to do that, and the key multilateral channel here is the World Food Program. And starting from 2013, Russia has been participating in the project for developing a sustainable school nutrition system in Tajikistan. From 2025 to 2027, its fourth stage will be implemented. Our voluntary earmarked contribution amounts to about $19 million. The key goal of the project is building sufficient capacity for independent management of the national school nutrition system, with a gradual transfer of all administrative and financial authority from the World Food Program to the Tajikistani authorities. On our part, we will further enhance our comprehensive cooperation with friendly Tajikistan, which is an important factor in reaching the large-scale tasks aimed at further social and economic progress. This year, our country is celebrating 500 years since the development of the Northern Sea Route. 500 years ago, Russian diplomat Dmitry Gerasimov produced the first charts of the Northern Sea Route. At that time, he proposed theoretical concepts for utilizing this waterway. Today, this route reaffirms its status as a unique transportation corridor. The diplomacy opens wide opportunities for mutually beneficial international cooperation to implement its potential. Now we see geopolitical turbulence. The Northern Sea Route is becoming an attractive alternative traditional intercontinental route because it is offering a competitive advantage through shorter distance, a higher level of security, and economic gains. I can give you the following example. A container vessel from China to Britain needs 18 days to reach the destination. Now let's see other logistics routes. By using railway, it's going to take at least 25 days. Through the Suez Canal, it's going to take 40 days. Bypassing the Cape of Good Hope, over 50 days. Experts note that transit of cargo through the Northern Sea Route will allow to reduce by 40% the expenses as well as the consumption of fuel and emissions. Will also allow to securely secure that the region is free from vessel congestion, piracy, and conflicts. Our ex-regional partners are extremely interested in this Northern Sea route. This route is a key element of the Trans-Arctic Transportation Corridor, and it plays an important role in implementing flagship initiative by Russian President Vladimir Putin to establish the Greater Eurasian Partnership. The history of the development of the Northern Sea Route is a testament to resilience and professional dedication of many generations of pioneers, seafarers, and researchers. Russia is the largest Arctic power. It intends to preserve and build upon their legacy. Today, our country is developing standards of responsible management of Arctic and demonstrates or acts as a paragon of responsible treatment of this natural site of this region. And we invite everybody who shares these goals and demonstrate a constructive and pragmatic approach to cooperate. October 5th, Slovakia held events were timed to coincide with the Carpathian Ducal Offensive operation. They featured the leadership of the country, representatives of veteran organizations, public, and the diplomatic corps. October 6, 1944, during the Carpathian Ducal operations, the Soviet troops, led by Marshal Ivan Konev, together with the 1st Czechoslovak Army Corps, following intense combat. The heavily fortified Dukla Pass was captured by storm. Czechoslovakia was liberated from German Nazi invaders. Along with the celebrations, timed to coincide with the Slovak National Uprising, August 1944, celebrating this anniversary is one of the important memorial events in Slovakia. The chairman of the government of the Slovak Republic, Robert Fico, said that the bravery and heroism of the fighters of the Red Army and the Czechoslovak Army Corps in the course of the fierce battles brought closer our shared victory over Nazism. He reaffirmed his unwavering position on historical truth, and he emphasized the inadmissibility of warping history to please political short-term interests and inadmissibility of vandalism and attempts to demolish memorials to Soviet soldiers, which is regrettably happening in a number of European countries. Today in Europe, monuments are being demolished, the history is being rewritten as they see fit, but the voice of Slovakia is resonating. Liberal diktat, anti-Russian history, we see that, and that's why such a position requires a special bravery, and it is being respected by us and highly appreciated. We will always remember how Slovak citizens have been preserving the memory of our servicemen that helped to liberate this country from Nazi soldiers. A lot of interest has been sparked by scaffolding. Scaffolding that one can see on the high-rise building of the Russian Foreign Ministry. There have been a lot of questions, ideas. We've heard everything. We receive questions from journalists, from the public, from local residents. So what is happening to the high-rise building of the Russian Foreign Ministry? Let me remind you that last year a new stage has been initiated to renovate the main building of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. I'll also discuss previous stages as well. But now let's talk about the most recent stage that started in 2024. Now the works are underway and they are going to continue on the left part of the high-rise building of the ministry, where you can see the scaffolding. The facade is now being renovated up until the 20th floor. The right with and the 4 towers on the 21st floor are also being renovated. The text of today's briefing will be once again published. You'll see plans and everything you need. You'll see there, pictures and everything. These works are being conducted without suspending the ministry's operations. The building has been separated in a couple of zones. The works are being conducted in each zone in stages. The concept that has been established includes architectural lighting that is to be installed of the entire facade. Windows will be replaced and the entrance group doors will be recreated. Site improvements works will be done on the central, near the central entry and the Denizhny alley. It's a site of the cultural significance of regional importance.
For instance, in the period from 1999 until 2000, the reconstruction of the left wing was carried out. In 2015-2017, the renovation, the restoration of this spire took place. Everyone remembers that very well. You have observed that and the decorative elements of the facade of the central part. In 2019, the reconstruction of the right wing was finalized. By the way, this part of the building hosted the press department, but now it has moved to the new building. This stage of renovation will be finalized by the end of 2030. In the text version of today's briefing, this information will be accompanied with the relevant links, photographs and materials. We will do our best to present you the full coverage and to answer all of your questions. I understand very well why it is a matter of such attention and why you are so curious about that. Is Международная жизнь, international life, with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. You have already mentioned this issue. On Monday, the recently appointed Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu announced his end of term and it's the beginning testimony of the beginning of the political crisis in France, so it's a matter of attention and we would like you to comment on that. Actually, we have paid attention to that. It was difficult not to pay attention to this matter, not because we are so interested in their domestic life. It's a part of work of foreign ministry, diplomats, embassies, to keep an eye on the situation. But for many years, and in recent months and recent years, the French authorities do their best to link their internal events with Russia. They have many ways of doing that. The Russian vessel captured by official Paris, it was just a failure, evidence failure. Just this attempt to distract attention from their own problems. And when President Putin mentioned in Valdai that by such pirate stories they are trying to conceal their own problems, to hide them. Actually, many experts have no questions left, but if someone had those questions, they were just all answered completely by this another stage of domestic crisis in France, this vessel. No one needed it any longer. They just forgot the reason of its arrest. It was released and they understood that it will not save them from domestic problems. They just paid their attention to crisis management the way they did it. Usually we do not comment on those issues, but actually Paris was the cause of this situation. Because they will tell its population why France's economy does not work the way it has been planned. They have declared it during their elections. The more we pay attention to their domestic issues, presenting the facts as they are, not false agenda, but the real agenda. This dismissing of the government, the internal political crisis, is a domestic issue of France. We will not speculate on this matter. We will not give them any pieces of advice. Let them deal with that themselves. They are a sovereign state. We will not be like them. constantly meddling with someone else's domestic affairs. It's the National Assembly that has taken this decision, and the citizens of France will present their point of view on this issue. Such concealed operations with the use of Russophobic rhetoric, we will mention them as well. Prime Minister Le Cornu, and I will remind you who he was. He used to be French defense minister, and he is known as one of the major architects of France's military policy. He just promoted this myth of Russian military threat. Maybe it was him who invented the entire story with this ship, with this vessel. He just surprised everyone. He became the head of government with the record short period of stay in this office, 27 days. It's no secret that the protest opinions in the French society are growing. It's a low rating of trust of citizens to the head of the government and the ruling party. They're just talking about some invented Russian threat, building some UAV walls, holding unnecessary summits, have Napoleonic ambitions, strange ambitions, and advocates the neo-Nazi Kiev regime. And it becomes more and more complicated for them to whip up this anti-Russian hysteria. That's what President Putin mentioned in Valdai. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is RIA Novosti with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova, Christine Rodriguez, RIA Novosti. I would like to ask you to comment on a popular interview of former Chancellor of Germany, Madam Merkel, to the Hungarian media outlet Partisan, where she mentioned that in 2021 several Eastern European countries refused to support her initiatives for creation of a format for dialogue with Russia. What's your opinion on that? I have a question also. Why has it been for so long? As Pushkin mentioned that, at first I wanted to keep silent, but it was back in 2021. 4 years have passed. Why did not she make public this information back then? Maybe it would have turned out differently. Everyone would have understood who is the party of war. But to add Merkel's revelations that she regarded the Minsk agreements as an instrument and not a document she had signed, and the document to be implemented, but an instrument with some political manipulations. And she was not ready to implement all that. That's who is responsible for what happened in Ukraine. But the artillery shootings, militarization of the Kiev regime, that just acted against its own population in Donetsk and Lugansk in January 2022. Now you have the full picture here. She mentioned in that interview that in the middle of 2022, being aware of the necessity of political dialogue with Russia, she put forward the initiative to create a new format for the EU leaders to have a possibility to directly speak to the top leadership of our country. As she said, there was such a necessity of a new negotiations format with Russia. But I do not know why they have this idea that Russia does not treat the Minsk agreements seriously. Russia has always highlighted the relevance of those agreements. It was Russia that proposed to enshrine those agreements in within the UN Security Council. And the German Chancellor Merkel said that this initiative of such a diplomatic breach was not supported by some NATO countries, namely Poland leadership, the leadership of the Baltic states. But how many times Russia? It was Russia. Today we will publish. Tomorrow we will do our best to publish quotations from Sergei Lavrov interviews, who noted that within the European Council there are such secret agents who are trying to disrupt, such moles supporting the policy alien to the European Union and act against the interests of the European Union. It's disruptive strategy, disruptive policy that has been like that, and Sergei Lavrov highlighted that many times. This destructive role of European mechanisms, new members of the European Union, namely Poland and Baltic states. In 2021, they just covered themselves with fears that the European Union will not be able to implement the consolidated policy with regard to Russia. But actually, that was the implementation of their own anti-Russian strategies. It was when the tail was controlling the dog. Those elites imposed on the EU majority, small elites, so to say, imposed on the EU majority their positions. Those people were ready to sacrifice European security in favor of their own sick phobias and, of course, for money. And there are also other officials who made statements in the interviews. Former Polish Foreign Ministry Sikorski, he accused Merkel of lies, and he qualified Merkel as one of the most harmful German politicians. But I would like to ask him for which period, the entire history of Germany? Then she can sue him, because there are some political figures with whom she can be compared. This range of German politicians has some worse figures, the worst figures. Actually, to some politicians, no one pays attention any longer. It is all archived. But Merkel, together with Hollande, French president, she regarded those agreements as a means of saving the Kiev regime from a catastrophe in 2015. Back then they were saving the Kiev regime. Now they are destroying the Ukrainian people. They have saved this regime. They have brought to power themselves in order to destroy the people. I have quoted similar historical situations today. The Minsk agreements, they just needed in order to win some time, in order to support, militarily support this regime. And from the start of the special military operation, actually her words about the desire for dialogue with Russia in 2021, they somehow correlate. Maybe the dialogue was some visibility, just some means of distraction from the resolution of major issues. But actually Merkel kept silence about many things in this interview to the Hungarian media outlet. She did not mention the many-year attempts of Russia to implement the Minsk agreements, how the Kiev regime and its Western sponsors refused to implement this set of measures since the 12th of February 2015. It was adopted by Resolution 22 of the UN Security Council, the barbaric shootings of the Ukrainian population. Merkel did not mention that. And a similar document was sent to the US, bilateral document. It was Russia who took active and constant efforts in order to resolve the Ukrainian crisis and to achieve international de-escalation. But the Kiev regime sponsors and its creators, they just deceived, they disrupted international law, as they put it, imposing strategic defeat on Russia. But actually now they have plunged into economic problems caused by their own catastrophic failure, catastrophic mistake, a mistake that is worse than a crime. But actually it's both. Thank you very much. Is Xinhua with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova, Xinhua correspondent. In Beijing, the Global Women's Summit will soon be held. What are your expectations regarding this summit? What have been the achievements of Russia in this sphere, and what are the prospects of cooperation between China and Russia in this sphere? It's about the forum that is planned in Beijing, the Global Summit, Women's Summit, to be held on the 13th, 14th of October. It is a major summit hosted by Chinese authorities. It's about the gender equality. It is a 30th anniversary of the fourth UN Conference on Women in 1995. It has brought together an unprecedented number of participants, namely female participants, female movement activists, and the Beijing Declaration adopted after this event. It remains relevant. Now about our country. Russia supports the main goals of the forum. The outcome of the 30-year work aimed at gender equality. I would like to highlight true gender equality, not the one that has been invented, perverted by ultra-liberal agenda, but the true equality. Stepping up global efforts to counter limited access of women to education, healthcare, and increasing the role of women in the digital economy. It will cooperate, it will facilitate women engagement and harmonize their involvement in the resolution of global problems. Our delegation will be headed by Galina Karelova. The leaders of the Union of Women of Russia will participate in the work of the forum. We have many organizations for women and organizations for resolving those tasks who operate very actively. This is one of the central organizations.
This organization is the successor of the Anti-Fascist Committee of the Soviet Women, and it's celebrating its 85th anniversary in 2026. In the last 30 years, Russia has been really successful in this regard. The legal framework has been expanded and enhanced that guarantees the equality between men and women. Not the warped one, but the equality that helps women to live, work, and cooperate. We have participation of women in political and economic life of the country. A package of measures has been implemented to support families raising children. It is aimed at two-parent and single-parent families, foster large families, as well as families raising children with disabilities. Financial mechanisms are being implemented for supporting families in acquiring housing. Russia has resolved fully preferential mortgage programs, rental cost compensation upon the birth of a child. And the issue of accessibility to preschool childcare institutions for families has been fully resolved as well. The infant mortality rate in our country is the lowest in the world, 4.2 cases per 1,000 children that were born alive. These are indicators that are hard to wrap your head around, but these figures exist, and this is the statistics, and I had to share it with you. Significantly decreased the maternal mortality rate, and the women are now participating increasingly in economic activity of our country especially women raising children, about 82%. The project My Mother is Entrepreneur is also gaining momentum, and Russian Foreign Ministry is now hiring more and more women, including for leadership positions. It's not being done to brag or boast. To counter some foreign standards. It's a natural process. Women get education and they demonstrate their perfect skills, and they are being trusted and respected by their colleagues. We stand in solidarity with our Chinese friends. Real care for women, for gender equality, is a matter of special concern for the state. The partnership between the Union of Women of Russia and the All China Women's Federation, the largest in China, that represents the interest of women, is developing year over year. A memorandum of cooperation has been signed between these two organizations. The platform for the Russian-Chinese cooperation are events, including within BRICS and SCO, and we are convinced that the global summit that Beijing is holding will give a good opportunity to promote the profile or to the dedicated Russian-Chinese dialogue and coordination of promising steps on the gender track in bilateral format. We wish effective and fruitful work, especially to women that can establish good ties and implement interesting projects. Thank you very much. Do we have Izvestia with us? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. My name is Anna Nikolskaya. I represent Izvestia. We have a similar question that was asked by the RIA Novosti representative about new formats and commentaries given by Angela Merkel. We would like to hear your opinion. Why a politician of such a level only now starts talking about the sabotage on the part of the European countries, and can other political figures be frank about that? Why are you asking me? You can ask the embassy in of Germany. Maybe you can ask Angela Merkel herself, although I understand that in recent years European politicians are not that open as they declare to be. But you should try at least. That's a good question. Well, they can do both. They start writing memoirs. For example, Annalena Baerbock has written a lot of memoirs and has gained or earned a lot of money on that. On the other hand, one can avoid escalation or open stage of conflict. Well, facts are being silenced about that. We should address those questions to these people. Why has Merkel been silent? Why are they publishing their memoirs at a time when one should work instead of promoting their personas? That's a good question. I'd like to hear the answer to this question as well. What else is she or can she tell or share on the aforementioned topic? It's a wide array of issues that we have, and we have raised these issues. What about the Berlin patient? What medicines did she take after she had visited him in his ward? Elements of the chemical weapons that were being used on the person who was in the same ward, very close to her. How could she neutralize those elements in her body? Well, Novichok affected her in some way, reportedly, and her memory started to work. What about other requests? For example, on the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines, there are other elements that can help us complete this puzzle of the international agenda and to clarify the history. What was she doing with the information that the Americans were listening in on her conversations? The Americans were intimidating Germany and saying that they would destroy the Nord Stream pipelines. Then they were in fact destroyed, and Germany itself did not support the idea of a transparent investigation, international investigation of this sabotage. We have a number of questions regarding this, and what was her role in all these processes. So a lot of issues surface in this regard. So we should address these questions to them directly. Thank you. Do we have Media Corporation China with us? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We're here. You've answered one of the questions to our colleagues from Xinhua. I'm going to ask you the second question. Donald Trump has recently said, and I quote him, that he has made a decision to supply Kiev with Tomahawk cruise missiles, and he wants to know what is going to be done with them and where they're going to be sent. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that such a move would lead to a rupture in Russian-American relations and will destroy positive tendencies that have emerged recently in relations between our countries. So the question is how the Russian side is assessing such statements of the American counterpart. I'd like to note that Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Ryabkov has given a commentary on this issue. I'd like to add something and to note that the Russian president has clearly indicated our stance towards such perilous moves if they are to be implemented. We have enhanced our missile defense. It's a very powerful weapon, the Tomahawk cruise missiles, and of course it will increase escalation of the Ukrainian crisis, but it will not affect the balance of power on the battlefield. The Tomahawk cruise missiles cannot be utilized without direct participation of American servicemen. Such a decision, it if it were to be taken, I'll repeat, is fraught with an escalation of the confrontation spiral. It would also cause irreparable damage to the Russian-American relations that have just started to get better and demonstrate elements of a productive dialogue. We closely follow the developments of the situation around this. We call for the utmost restraint in handling this highly sensitive issue that might significantly complicate the search for solutions in Ukraine, and we hope that Washington will hear our message. Thank you very much. Do we have Reuters with us? Good afternoon. I have a very brief question. Financial Times has recently published an article saying that the European Union has agreed to restrict the movement of Russian diplomats within the bloc in response to, and I quote this, a round of attempts of sabotage and subversions that, according to European special services, has been implemented or has been carried out by spies acting under the diplomatic umbrella. Will Russia react to this, and will Russia restrict, in response to this measure, the movement of European diplomats in Russia? Just a second. Let me respond to the first part of your question. Well, I just like to ask the second part of the question. What is the situation right now? Do I understand that correctly, that European diplomats are now not restricted in their movement across Russia, or are they restricted in fact? So can I specify this in my question? Well, as for the first part of your question, I would say that it requires a brief explanation. We should talk about history of this matter. Well, they started to mistreat our diplomats a long time ago. I think I wouldn't be wrong if I said that we've been living like this for more than a decade. They deported Russian diplomats. They violated their diplomatic rights. They restricted them by introducing quotas for Russian diplomatic missions abroad. They banned them from moving around across the European bloc. Well, you should not limit that issue to the European Union. We're talking more widely, namely about the NATO space. Our diplomats have been intimidated, were spied upon. Well, it has now reached a completely new level. It used to be a routine of special services. They have always demonstrated interest towards foreign missions on their territory, but it has now turned into intimidation practices. They intimidate they said that they would use Molotov cocktails, that they would physically abuse our diplomats. Diplomatic vehicles have been attacked. People were intimidated, have been intimidated, and have been getting emails and letters with intimidations. So different wordings have been used when they talked about physical safety. Families haven't been able to reunite because their visas were denied or have been denied, and it's been going on for more than 10 years now. Let alone the information campaigns that are aimed at vilifying our country. Remember our ambassador in the United States, Mr. Kislak. He has been called all names there are. But now the United States are persecuting people who had been mistreating them, and now there are legal claims against those people, but nobody apologized to Mr. Kislak, and one has to. I'm not sure that we have to focus on some specific issues. We have to look at this madness in total. the madness that has been initiated in NATO and EU countries. We have to look at it comprehensively. Thank you very much for this question and for your desire to look at what the situation is right now. We can publish the information on this later. What measures have been introduced, at what stage. We have been trying to indicate or to demonstrate that one should live differently. One could follow different type of logic. Maybe you remember how we reciprocated to the deportation of Russian diplomats by Obama, who lost elections in the U.S. and figured that he was not elected by not American people, but by Russian diplomats. Well, Russian diplomats were deported. It was mad. It was crazy. It was dangerous. There was no time to do that. They boarded planes and traveled from city to city. I just don't want to remember that even. Remember, Russia proposed at that time to establish friendship with the American side. Maybe you remember that story when children of American diplomats were invited to the Kremlin Christmas tree, and you remember how they reacted to this gesture of goodwill and genuine desire to cooperate and be friends and mutually respect each other. Well, so it was not accepted, this hand of goodwill. As far as the movement goes, each NATO state, member state, has its own methods. They exert pressure on our diplomats and create conditions that are not conducive to their diplomats performing their duties. In each NATO member state, there are certain restrictive measures. There were no unified measures because they have different location. Our embassies are located in different cities and locales. Our residential buildings are also sometimes separated from the embassies, though they have always been creative in inflicting damage upon us and being mean to us. If you're interested, we can compile a list of countries that have been active on this track. I think that we should engage in such discussions, and we are going to prepare a brochure telling how NATO and EU countries, what they have been doing to worsen the conditions for our diplomats. I'd like to emphasize once again that we have never been the first one to act, and I've given you examples. If that were to be implemented, of course, we would reciprocate. We're now talking not about official statements, but about media material that has been sharing insider info about certain plans. If they notify us via official channels, of course, we'll declare what our steps are going to be. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have Anadolu with us? Yes, Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We have just one question. UN Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights, Alexander Xantaki, called upon FIFA and UEFA to suspend Israel from international football. How would Moscow evaluate such a call? Do you agree with such a call? I think that sports is such an area, and you can characterize it by different characteristics, but there is something that differentiates sports from other areas of human creative side and activities that we pursue. Sports has rules. There can be there can be no situation where there are no rules in sport. Then it's not sport. It can be anything. It can be festivals, it can be forums, it can be some artistic evenings and events. What is a sport without rules? We're talking about regulations, provisions, different parameters. In sport, there should be rules. Sport of double standards is turning it into something completely different. This area should be regulated as well in sport. One should have rules. These rules should be enshrined in a document. It should not be politicized. And these rules should be applied to everyone.
So that's